camera has been a way of life for me. It's about being able to answer the questions that I want to know in life, and the camera helps me do that. I have been, exploring light that whole time and what light can do. If there's anything that holds all of my work together, it's that aspect of light. That high contrast and the way that light transforms the ordinary into the magical, that became how I looked at everything.
Hi there. Trent Parke was the first Australian to become a full member of Magnum. Most photographers refine their aesthetic as their career progresses, producing images that become more and more precise. But Parke has moved in the opposite direction, towards mystery and ambiguity. He's continually reinvented himself, from newspaper sports photographer to street photographer to producing a semi-apocalyptic vision of his nation, to finally becoming an enigmatic autobiographer. I first became aware of him when I bought the book The Seventh Wave in 2000. I found the pictures startling because nobody had done anything quite like this before. They're exciting but also beautiful. The images are in part documentary but also highly expressionistic. The figures are caught unaware. They seem to be performing their own private dance in the sea. At the turn of the century, photojournalism and documentary photography were only beginning to be assimilated into the art world. And these pictures perfectly encapsulate the idea of creating art through a documentary aesthetic. Strange arrangements of disconnected body parts form highlights and shadows that compete for the viewer's attention. He discovered a unique technique for capturing these photographs, actually by mistake. This approach of learning through error is something that he's lent into throughout his career.
I'd put the battery in the camera upside down, which, unbeknown to us, fired the shutter speed at this extraordinary fast speed. So coming back at the end of the day, and I'm like, oh, what have I done? I remember we put them into the tank, these negatives into the tank, and we processed them. I put a copious amount of developer in, and we just processed them for a copious amount of time. And when we pulled those negatives out, I'll never forget that moment. There was this sharpness, this incredible sort of silver quality to them that we'd all of a sudden got. And from that point on, that's how we made that work.
He grew up in the suburbs of a small steel town called Newcastle, and an incident that occurred when he was 13 years old shaped the rest of his life and constantly reveals itself through his photography.
My mum, who had asthma, died suddenly from an asthma attack, and I was with her at the time, and it was a pretty traumatic experience, as you can imagine, for a young kid. Dad was at squash that night, and yeah, I guess it then influenced everything that has happened since that point. It's not something that goes away, and it has come out in my art. And it was probably a short time later that I picked up her camera, the Pentax Spotmatic, and started to take photographs. And that sort of, the camera's never been out of my hands since. I think from that moment, that Mum died, it was, you're questioning life for everything. Why are we here? Where are we going? What happens next? What's the purpose of any of this, that we're on this planet? And that has been part of, from that moment, from everything that I think about on a daily basis. It's never left. And and death is never far away from my thoughts.
The political atmosphere within Australia during the early 2000s was influenced by events like the Bali bombings and the September 11 attacks. There was a hardening of counter-terrorism policies, leading to an atmosphere of suspicion and a heightened sense of threat and fear. On top of that, environmental concerns were also coming to the fore, and He sensed a gradual fracturing of the myth of Australian innocence.
It was, around September 11, there was all these things that were happening where the world was in this sort of real point of change. And Australia especially was, we didn't have any wars. We didn't have those sort of, it was so far removed from everything. But there was this feeling that, the whole time the Howard government was like, the attack is imminent, it will happen. And it was during the worst drought in some of the worst droughts in history as well. There were firestorms that had taken a lot of lives. There was this real point of change, and there was this poll that said that 65% of Australians thought that the country had come to the end of a so-called era. So for me, it was like setting off to want to go out into the country and really see for myself.
Parke wanted to produce a project that reflected this change of mood within his country. In 2003, he and his wife Narelle set off on a 2-year, 90,000-kilometer trip to investigate this sense of unease. Stylistically, the work is cinematic and at times even violent. His images are filled with high contrasts, unpredictable compositions, and he uses flash like a flamethrower. He wasn't attempting to produce a documentary. Every frame seems to be like an ominous premonition. His work destabilizes the myth of Australia as an easygoing, sunlit place of eternal optimism. Being on the road for 2 years can seem like an extended holiday, but for a photographer it introduces a number of day-to-day challenges.
Yeah, it was one of the trips that defined our whole life. We processed all the films along the way. Every time we'd get into a caravan park, I'd have all my rolls. I'd get the tanks and process them at the sinks in the and hang them on the clotheslines, hang them on trees, hang them wherever we could. We'd get them on. So we'd have the tent. I'd have this little tiny scanner, little Nikon scanner with a little printer, and I would print stuff out along the way. And I made this accordion book as we were traveling around for the 2 years. Because for me, I need to see what I'm shooting. One thing leads to the next. One idea leads to the next thing. And when you see something, on the negative, it's like, oh, I've got to go and try that and push that further, push that idea further. So it's a continual process.
The photographs made during this trip appear in the book Minutes to Midnight. It captures both his internal world as well as a wider cultural, political, and psychological shift. Parke's work attempts to puncture illusions about Australia in a similar manner to how Robert Frank's The Americans exposed the fracturing within the US. But I don't see the same level of splintering within Australian society. I have family in the country and I've travelled fairly widely. It isn't the easiest place to produce unconventional photographs. It's not like the US, which is filled with discord and disconnected elements within the landscape. I would describe Australia as a neatly put together and socially and economically fairly flat society. One couldn't easily do a Walker Evans or even a Stephen Shaw type project. In my mind, this unsettling work is more of an intense personal vision, reflected through the external. Parke has the ability to focus deeply on a detail or visual aberration, and then stick with this concept until he can translate it into a picture.
There's a shot that I took called Moving Bus, and it was again something I saw on the negative, a tiny little piece of the negative, and I was doing very slow time exposures in Sydney, on the streets of Sydney. I saw this part of this image on this negative. I then went back every day for 3 months until I got this particular picture, until I'd exhausted every possible option, but I got the big picture that I was after that I could never see being replicated again. And it all came down to a moment with many sort of facets and many sorts of things going on in the image that all come together for that one split second and gone forever. It's the ones where you pull them out and go, look at that. Life, chance, all these elements come together for a split second and have then created, and the process of chemicals on film, all of those ideas, and then all of a sudden something is unique is there that presents itself.
The next project and book that I want to look at is called The Black Rose. It was published in 2015, but it was the culmination of 7 years of deeply personal and evocative work. It's autobiographical and at the same time explores universal themes of love, loss, memory, and the passage of time.
This is what I love about photography, that things that have influenced your life when you're growing up, they come through in other ways. And so what I'm fascinated is what I am drawn to actually take the picture, why I've seen that particular thing and press the button. And usually it is something that has influenced your life as in your time growing up. And that's what's special to me about photography. It's a part of me that you're getting with my pictures.
Parke photographed everyday life and the natural world, but he manages to infuse mundane moments with symbolic meaning. The book features a mix of black and white and color photographs. The imagery is often intimate and evocative, but on the whole, it has a poetic quality. He also links photographs with words from his diaries and writings. This combination provides us with insights into his inner world. The black rose becomes a recurring symbol throughout the book.
This is the black rose. This is the start of the entire project and where the project stemmed from. The Black Rose is the culmination of 7 years' work. It started with a single line to a friend about the possibility of doing a project on the theme of home. Little did I know that 7 years later I would end up with hundreds of written stories, thousands of photographs, and 14 books which dissected basically my entire life.
In the early chapters, the black rose serves as a symbol of mourning and loss. As the book progresses, it takes on more of a mysterious form, more complex and ambiguous. In later chapters, the black rose symbolizes rebirth and renewal. Parke's book Monument spans 25 years of his black and white street photography, and it reflects the fragility and transitory nature of human existence. It was inspired by NASA's Golden Record, a time capsule that they sent into space containing sounds and images that portray life on Earth. Parke's project similarly attempted to distill and present a monument to humankind. He selected images that convey the pulse of life and the precarious nature of human existence. The photographs in this book continue to gravitate towards the dramatic contrast between light and shadow, as with all his work. Light has become the primary subject as he shifts his focus between intimate moments and the broader rhythms of urban life.
Anyone can take a good picture. It's about how you sequence that, how you take those pictures and make something more meaningful. That's the secret, that's the key, that's the most difficult thing to do. And that's the real art of what I believe, of what I do.
As Parke described earlier, the effects of his childhood trauma are reflected in what and how he chooses to photograph. The momentous experience of witnessing his mother dying has left its mark. Looking at his work, one is constantly reminded of the fragility and unpredictability of life. By emphasizing light and shadow elements, he transforms everyday scenes into symbols of human fragility. This book again has a cinematic quality as he creates a tension in order to emphasize ideas of vulnerability and otherworldliness. If one strips away the dramatic lighting from these scenes, they wouldn't maintain feelings of uncertainty or drama. But through his awareness of light variances, he manages to visually isolate individuals from their surroundings, or to pick them out from within crowds. This produces an undercurrent of unease. It's a very specific way of seeing, driven by a particular need to express. Thanks for staying with me, and I'll see you next time.
It's very important for me when I'm photographing that memory and experience, and that I have a unique sort of feeling and understanding of the place that I'm in, that comes through in the photographs that I take. It has to have some sort of communication to what I'm feeling at this moment in time, at this very moment in my life. I think the most important thing about photography is memory. It is about time. It is about capturing a moment for me that I can look back on. Everything that I've shot in my life has been autobiographical. It has been a part of my life. It has to mean something to me. If it means something to me, generally, it will have some sort of feeling on someone else. Because what's important is up here, and all your experiences, what you've had in your lifetime, everything that you feel needs to come out. And that only happens from a personal experience.